These are the 5 truths about your purpose that, according to St. John Paul II, have been blocking you from living the mission God gave you without you even realizing it. And I'm going to show you the difference between the 5th and most powerful truth, the 4th truth, the 3rd and the 2nd, all the way down to the 1st truth, the one you are probably living with right now. The truth of your purpose is not what you think it is. St. John Paul II taught in his apostolic letter on the mission of the lay faithful that most Catholics spend their entire lives searching for a purpose outside themselves when their true mission is already written in the present moment. Margaret Sullivan, 72, from Spokane, Washington, attended 14 parish retreats over 9 years searching for her calling. And when she finally understood this first truth, she discovered her purpose had been in front of her the entire time. In the care of her elderly neighbor who had no family, you think your purpose is something you will discover later. Later in this video, we have the 3rd truth, the 4th truth, and the 5th and most transformative truth according to St. John Paul II. And now, the 2nd truth. Your purpose does not require permission. St. John Paul II wrote in Christi Fideles Laici that too many faithful Catholics wait for a priest to assign them a mission, a bishop to send them on a retreat, or a spiritual director to confirm what God has already placed in their hearts. This 2nd truth addresses what he called the paralysis of waiting. Your mission begins the moment you recognize it, not the moment someone else validates it. Dorothy Ann Mitchell, 68, from Richmond, Virginia, spent 12 years asking 3 different spiritual directors if she was called to start a prayer group for widows in her parish. She attended 6 discernment retreats. She made 4 separate novenas for clarity. After her 3rd spiritual director told her to stop asking and simply begin, she said, "I thought God needed someone more qualified, someone the church would choose. And I kept waiting for a sign that never came because the sign had already been given." Within 6 weeks of starting the prayer group, 11 women joined. Within 3 months, 2 of those women who had not spoken to their adult children in years reconciled because of what they heard in that room. Patricia Ann Rogers, 71, from Charleston, South Carolina, waited 9 years for her pastor to approve a Eucharistic adoration hour she wanted to organize. And when she finally began it on her own, with just 1 other woman from her parish, the pastor joined them 2 months later. Waiting for permission is not humility. It is fear disguised as obedience. Later in this video, we have the 4th truth and the most transformative truth according to St. John Paul II. And now, the 3rd truth. Your purpose is inseparable from your suffering. St. John Paul II wrote Salvifici Doloris, his apostolic letter on the Christian meaning of human suffering, after surviving the assassination attempt in St. Peter's Square in 1981. He did not write it as a bishop observing suffering from a distance. He wrote it as a man who had been shot, who had forgiven his attacker and who understood that his suffering was not an interruption of his mission, but the very place where his mission became most clear. In that letter, he revealed something most Catholics never hear from the pulpit. He wrote that suffering is not only a consequence of sin or a test of faith. Suffering is the place where your unique and irreplaceable purpose is often revealed, because no one else has suffered exactly as you have. And no one else can reach the person God has placed in front of you the way you can. This 3rd truth is the one most Catholic women over 65 resist the most, because if your suffering has a purpose, it means the years you thought were wasted were not wasted at all. It means God did not abandon you during the hardest seasons of your life. It means He was preparing you. Helen Grace Patterson, 70, from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, lost her only son in a car accident 23 years ago. She attended grief counseling for 2 years. She went on 3 different silent retreats. She prayed the rosary every single day and still felt that God had gone silent. She told her sister, "I keep asking God why He took him, and I never get an answer, and I do not know if I can keep praying to someone who will not tell me why." 12 years after her son passed, a woman she had never met approached her after Mass. The woman was younger, maybe 40, and Helen noticed she had been crying. They stood outside the church in the parking lot in the early afternoon sun. The woman said, "I saw you praying during Mass, and I do not know why, but I felt like I was supposed to talk to you. My son was just diagnosed with leukemia, and I do not know how to pray anymore." Helen did not plan what she said next. She said, "I lost my son 23 years ago, and I thought God was punishing me. But I think maybe he was preparing me to stand here with you right now." They prayed together. Helen visited the woman's son in the hospital twice a week for 7 months. When the boy went into remission, the mother wrote Helen a letter that said, "You were the only person who did not tell me it would be okay. You were the only person who let me feel what I was feeling, and that is what kept me from losing my faith." Helen later said, "I spent 23 years thinking my suffering had no meaning, and then I realized it was the only thing that qualified me to do what no one else in that parking lot could have done. Your suffering is not a detour from your purpose. It is often the road that leads you directly to the person only you can help." And the fifth and most transformative truth, according to St. John Paul II, is coming. And now the fourth truth. Your purpose changes as you age, and that is exactly what God intended. St. John Paul II addressed this directly in his letter to the elderly, written in 1999, when he himself was 79 years old and suffering visibly from Parkinson's disease. He wrote to those who believed their mission ended when their health declined, or their children grew, or their spouse passed. He said that the later years of life are not a slow retreat from purpose, but an entry into a different and equally essential mission that younger Catholics cannot fulfill. He called it the apostolate of presence, the ministry of intercession, and the witness of endurance. This fourth truth is the one that brings the most relief and the most resistance, because if your purpose is not over, it means you are still responsible, and many Catholic women at this age are tired of being responsible. But St. John Paul II understood something about purpose that most homilies never address. He understood that the purpose of a woman at 70 is not the same as the purpose of a woman at 40, and God does not expect it to be. Your mission now is not to do more. It is to become more. It is not to serve everyone. It is to intercede for the ones only you can reach through prayer. It is not to fix what is broken in your family or your parish. It is to offer your limitations, your fatigue, and your loneliness as the very thing God will use to accomplish what activity never could. Barbara Jean Wallace, 74, from Scranton, Pennsylvania, was a Eucharistic minister for 32 years. She visited homebound parishioners every Saturday. She organized the parish food drive every Thanksgiving and Christmas. She baked for every funeral reception. When she turned 70, her knees began to fail. She could no longer drive long distances. She could no longer stand for more than 20 minutes without pain. She stepped down from every ministry she had served. She told her daughter, "I feel like I am disappearing. Like everything I did for the church does not matter anymore because I cannot do it anymore. And I do not know what God wants from me now." Her daughter suggested she begin a prayer list. Barbara resisted. She said, "That is what old people do when they cannot do anything else." But she began anyway. She wrote down the names of people in her parish who were suffering, people she heard about during the prayer of the faithful at Mass, people her friends mentioned in passing. She prayed the rosary for one person each day. She did not tell anyone she was doing this. She did not ask for updates. She simply prayed. 3 months later, a woman she had never spoken to approached her after Mass. The woman was in her 50s. She said, "I do not know if you remember me, but you were a Eucharistic minister when my husband was in the hospital 6 years ago. You brought him communion twice, and he passed 2 weeks later." Barbara did not remember her. The woman continued. She said, "I have been angry at God since he died. I stopped praying. I only come to Mass because my daughter makes me. But 2 weeks ago I felt something change, and I do not know why. I just felt like I could pray again. I felt like God was listening, and I wanted to tell someone. And when I saw you today, I knew I was supposed to tell you." Barbara later found out from a mutual friend that this woman's husband had been on the prayer list she prayed over. She had prayed the rosary for him, for his wife, and for their family every day for 2 weeks without knowing it. Barbara said, "I thought my purpose was over when I could not serve anymore, but I was more present in that woman's life through prayer than I ever was when I was running from one ministry to another. I just did not see it." 6 months later, Barbara started receiving prayer requests from women in her parish. She never asked for them. They simply began arriving. A note slipped into her hand after Mass. A phone call from someone who heard she was praying. A text message from a granddaughter asking her to pray for a friend. Within a year, she was praying for 47 people by name. She kept a notebook. She wrote the date she began praying for each person and the date the prayer was answered. She said, "I have more purpose now than I had when I could drive and stand and bake, because now I am doing the one thing no one else in my parish has time to do. I am standing in the gap." After Barbara shared this with her prayer group, another woman in the group, 71-year-old Catherine Marie Doyle from Allentown, Pennsylvania, said, "I thought my life was over when my husband passed, but maybe it is just starting." St. John Paul II himself lived this truth. In his final years, when he could barely speak and could no longer walk without assistance, he did not retire. He did not disappear. He offered his suffering publicly as an intercession for the Church. He said that his weakness was his most powerful homily. If you feel that your purpose has ended because you can no longer do what you used to do, you have believed a lie. Your purpose has not ended, it has deepened. And now I am asking you to recognize that the inability to serve in the way you once did may be the very thing that qualifies you to serve in the way only you can now. And now I ask you to identify with what you have just heard, because the most powerful mission of your life may not be behind you. It may be exactly where you are standing right now. You have received 4 truths. You have heard that your purpose is not what you think it is, that it does not require permission, that it is inseparable from your suffering, and that it changes as you age. These 4 truths have been leading you toward the one truth St. John Paul II considered the most transformative, the truth that answers the question you have been carrying for longer than you realize. And now, the 5th and most transformative truth, according to St. John Paul II. Your purpose was given to you before you were born, and you cannot lose it. St. John Paul II addressed this in his encyclical Evangelium Vitae, his letter on the value and inviolability of human life, and in his theology of the body, where he wrote that every human person is called by name from eternity, that God does not assign purposes arbitrarily or revoke them when we fail. Your mission is not something you earn. It is something you receive. It is not something you achieve. It is something you uncover. And the reason so many Catholic women at this stage of life feel that they have lost their purpose is not because their purpose disappeared. It is because they have been measuring their purpose by the wrong standard. They have been measuring it by accomplishment when God measures it by presence. They have been measuring it by activity when God measures it by availability. They have been measuring it by what they can still do when God measures it by who they have become. St. John Paul II knew this personally. He was born in 1920 in Wadowice, Poland. His mother passed when he was 8 years old. His only brother passed when he was 12. His father passed when he was 20. He worked in a quarry during the Nazi occupation. He studied for the priesthood in secret. He became a bishop under Soviet oppression. He survived an assassination attempt. He led the church for 27 years while suffering from Parkinson's disease. And in his final years, when he could barely lift his hand to bless the crowds in St. Peter's Square, he said that his mission had never been clearer, because his mission was not to do more. It was to reveal the dignity of human suffering and the power of a life offered completely to God, regardless of what that life could no longer accomplish. He lived what he taught. And the fifth truth he revealed is this: you do not need to know what your purpose is in order to live it. You only need to say yes to what is in front of you right now. Elizabeth Rose. Campbell, 73, from Knoxville, Tennessee, had been asking God for 30 years what her purpose was. She prayed novenas. She attended discernment retreats. She read books on finding your calling. She asked her spiritual director, her pastor, and her closest friends. No one could tell her. She said, "I feel like everyone else knows what they are supposed to be doing, and I am still waiting for God to tell me. And I am afraid I am going to die without ever knowing why I was here." She had spent most of her adult life caring for her mother, who had dementia. Her mother passed 4 years ago. Her husband passed 2 years ago. She had no children. She lived alone. She attended daily mass. She prayed the rosary every night. And still, she felt that her life had no direction, no meaning, no mission. One Saturday afternoon in April, Elizabeth was sitting in her living room reading a letter from a childhood friend when she noticed her neighbor across the street carrying groceries into her house. The neighbor was younger, maybe 50, and Elizabeth had spoken to her only twice in the 3 years since the woman moved in. Elizabeth felt a sudden and specific urge to go help her. She resisted. She thought, "I do not even know her. It would be strange to just walk over there." But the urge did not leave. She put down the letter. She walked across the street. She said, "I saw you carrying those bags, and I thought maybe you could use a hand." The neighbor looked at her and started crying. She said, "I just found out my sister has stage 4 cancer, and I've been trying to hold it together all day, and I did not think anyone even noticed I existed." They stood on the front porch. Elizabeth did not say anything. She just listened. The neighbor talked for 20 minutes. When she finished, she said, "Thank you for seeing me." Elizabeth walked home. She did not think about it again until the following week, when the same neighbor knocked on her door with a loaf of bread she had baked. She said, "I have been thinking about what you did, and I realized I have been so angry at God for what is happening to my sister that I stopped praying. But when you came over that day, I felt like maybe God had not forgotten about me." Elizabeth said, "I did not do anything." The neighbor said, "You did everything." That moment changed the way Elizabeth understood her purpose. She said, "I spent 30 years asking God what my purpose was, and I thought he was never going to answer. But I think he was answering the whole time. I just was not listening. Because my purpose was not a job or a title or a ministry. My purpose was to notice the person in front of me and say yes when God said, 'Go.'" Over the next 2 years, Elizabeth helped 4 more neighbors in small and specific ways. She drove one woman to chemotherapy appointments. She babysat for another woman's grandchildren when the woman had surgery. She prayed with a widow who lived 2 doors down and had not been to Mass in 15 years. None of these were planned. None of these were part of a ministry. They were simply moments when God said go, and Elizabeth said yes. She said, "I do not know if I will ever have a big purpose, but I know now that I do not need one, because the purpose God gave me is happening every time I notice someone and choose to love them instead of walking past." In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25, Jesus said, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." He did not say whatever you accomplished. He did not say whatever you built or organized or led. He said whatever you did. One act, one person, one moment of obedience. That is the purpose. And this is the moment where the exact words you have been carrying since the beginning of this video come together. These are the 5 truths about your purpose that will change everything. Your purpose is not what you think it is. Your purpose does not require permission. Your purpose is inseparable from your suffering. Your purpose changes as you age. And your purpose was given to you before you were born, and you cannot lose it. What you can do right now is this. First, stop asking what your purpose is and start asking who is in front of you. St. John Paul II taught that mission is not discovered in silence, it is revealed in encounter. Second, offer your suffering as intercession. Write down the name of one person who is suffering and pray the rosary for them this week. Third, let go of the need for permission. If God has placed something on your heart that serves Him and does not contradict the Church, begin it. Fourth, accept that your mission now is different from your mission 10 years ago, and that is not a loss, it is a gift. Your presence matters more than your productivity. Fifth, say yes to the next small thing, the next neighbor, the next phone call, the next moment when you feel the urge to reach out and you want to ignore it. Say yes instead. St. John Paul II said that the Church does not need more programs. The Church needs more witnesses. He lived that. He witnessed through suffering. He witnessed through limitation. He witnessed through presence. And He is asking you to do the same. Tonight, before you go to sleep, I want you to do one thing. Go to the room where you pray. It does not matter if it is your bedroom or your kitchen or a corner of your living room. Bring a piece of paper and a pen. Sit in front of the crucifix or the image of Mary or whatever sacred image you keep in that space. Ask God to show you one person He is placing in front of you right now. Do not overthink it. The first name that comes to mind is the right name. Write that name on the paper, then pray 1 decade of the rosary for that person. When you finish, say this out loud. Lord, I give you my yes. I do not need to know the whole plan. I just need to know the next step. And I trust that you will show me. St. John Paul II prayed the full rosary every single day of his life, even on the day he was shot, even in the years when he could barely speak. He believed that the rosary was not just a devotion, it was a mission. Every Hail Mary was an act of intercession. Every mystery was an entry into the life of Christ. And when you pray that decade tonight, you are not just praying for that person. You are stepping into the mission God gave you before you were born. And I'm asking you now to commit to this, because this one act of obedience tonight may be the beginning of the purpose you have been searching for your entire life. There is a woman in your parish who prays faithfully but feels that her prayers are not reaching anyone, who wonders if her life still matters now that she can no longer do what she used to do, and she needs to hear this message tonight. There is a daughter or granddaughter in your life who is struggling to understand what God is asking of her, who feels lost and without direction, and this message will give her the clarity she has been praying for. There is a friend who has been suffering for years and feels that her suffering has no meaning, who is losing hope that anything will ever change, and this video will show her that her pain was never wasted. When you share this message, you are doing what St. John Paul II did his entire life. You are multiplying grace. You are becoming the answer to someone else's prayer. And that is the mission. May the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit guard your heart and confirm the mission He has written into every moment of your life. May St. John Paul II, who suffered and endured and never stopped saying yes, intercede for you tonight as you take the first step toward the purpose God placed in front of you before you were even born. You now know that your purpose is not lost. You now know that God has not forgotten you, and the mission you have been searching for has been waiting for you in the very place you are standing right now.